Most Americans think Canada is just a colder version of the United States. Same language, same stores, same culture, easy, right? But the moment they actually start living in Canada, the shock hits faster than they expect. They realize Canada isn't America with snow. It's a country with its own rhythm, its own rules, and a lifestyle that feels completely different, sometimes in ways they were never prepared for. The first problem? Canada feels quieter than they ever imagined. Neighborhoods go silent at night, streets calm down early. Even inside cities like Toronto and Vancouver, people move with a slower, calmer energy. For Americans used to noise, speed, convenience, and constant activity, that sudden quiet feels uncomfortable, almost unsettling. And that's just the beginning. There's something about living in Canada that forces Americans to confront things they never had to think about before. A new pace, a new social culture, a new sense of personal space. And very quickly, many realize that handling life in Canada takes more adjustment than they ever expected. It's not about survival. It's about thriving in a place that operates on completely different unspoken rules that nobody warned them about before they made the move. The second thing that hits Americans is the weather. And not just the cold, but the way Canadians treat the cold like it's nothing. In the US, a snowstorm shuts down schools, work, plans, everything. But in Canada, life keeps moving. People walk to work in temperatures that would close entire American cities. Kids play outside while the wind feels like it's slicing through your jacket. Cars start in the morning even when the air hurts your face. And the real shock? Canadians don't complain about it the way Americans do. They just bundle up, keep going, and treat winter like it's another part of normal life. For Americans who thought they were ready for the cold, the reality hits hard. The long winters feel endless. The early sunsets affect their mood, and the daily routine of scraping ice, layering clothes, and navigating icy streets becomes exhausting. And when they see Canadians acting like all of this is perfectly normal, that's when the thought hits them. Maybe I wasn't as prepared for this country as I thought. The winter doesn't just challenge their body. It challenges their entire mindset about what daily life should feel like. It strips away the comfort they took for granted and replaces it with constant adaptation, constant awareness, and constant effort just to function normally. Then comes the financial shock. Many Americans move to Canada thinking the cost of living will feel similar to home, but nothing prepares them for the prices. Groceries cost more, rent hits harder, eating out drains their wallet, and everyday essentials that felt affordable in the US suddenly feel like luxuries. A simple grocery run feels like a warning sign. Housing is even worse. They discover that in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the rent is higher than most of the US, but the salaries don't always match. And when they add Canadian taxes into the mix, the realization hits fast. Living comfortably in Canada is harder than they expected. It's not impossible, but it requires an adjustment most Americans didn't plan for. The sticker shock doesn't fade after a week or two. It becomes a constant presence. Every purchase feels heavier. Every bill feels more significant. And suddenly, the financial freedom they had back home feels distant. They start budgeting differently, cutting back on things they never thought twice about before, and questioning whether their income can actually support the lifestyle they imagined. The money stress doesn't break them immediately, but it wears them down slowly, making everything else feel harder to manage than it should. But the biggest shock isn't money, it's the people. Canadians operate with a social code that many Americans simply aren't used to. Canadians are polite, but in a quiet, distant, almost indirect way. They don't overshare. They don't rush into friendships. They don't start conversations with strangers just because they feel like it. For Americans used to open expression, loud energy, and direct communication, Canada feels emotionally colder. Canadians give space, sometimes too much space, and that makes some Americans feel lonely. They realize Canadians don't get close fast. Trust builds slowly. And the unspoken rules, waiting in perfect lines, not interrupting, apologizing constantly, avoiding confrontation, create a culture that's respectful but hard to decode. Americans find themselves wondering if they did something wrong, if people don't like them, or if they're just misreading the signals entirely. The truth is, Canadians are kind. They're just reserved. They value boundaries, privacy, and emotional restraint in ways that can feel like rejection to someone who's used to warmth being loud and immediate. And that social distance creates a loneliness that Americans didn't expect, because they're surrounded by people but can't quite connect the way they're used to connecting. Another thing Americans struggle with is the pace. Canada moves slower, emotionally, socially, and even physically. People walk slower, speak softer, and take their time. Businesses close earlier. Nightlife is quieter. The chaos and adrenaline that many Americans are used to just isn't there. At first, it feels peaceful. But after a while, some Americans realize they rely on that energy more than they thought. The slower mornings, calmer streets, and quiet weekends make them feel like something is missing. Not because Canada is boring, but because the rhythm of life forces them to slow down too, and slowing down exposes things they never had to confront before: solitude, silence, and stillness. The constant stimulation they had back home kept them distracted, kept them moving, kept them from sitting with their own thoughts too long. But Canada strips that away. The quiet forces reflection. The slower pace demands patience. And for Americans who built their identity around speed, productivity, and constant motion, this shift feels uncomfortable. They start questioning what they actually enjoy when there's no noise to fill the space. They realize they don't know how to rest, how to be still, how to exist without urgency. And that realization can be harder to face than any winter storm. Then there's the emotional distance, literally and figuratively. Canada is huge, and everything feels far apart. Cities are spaced out. Travel takes longer. Family feels farther away. And culturally, Canadians keep emotional boundaries that Americans sometimes misinterpret as coldness. Even when Canadians are kind, they are reserved. They help, but they don't involve themselves in other people's business. They are friendly, but not forward. For Americans who are used to community being loud and expressive, the silence inside relationships feels strange. Not cold, but subtle. And that subtlety is hard to adjust to. The geographic distance compounds the emotional one. Long drives between cities mean fewer spontaneous visits. Winter weather makes travel unpredictable. And suddenly, Americans find themselves more isolated than they've ever been, even in cities full of people. The distance isn't just measured in miles, it's measured in how hard it becomes to maintain connections, to feel rooted, to feel like they belong somewhere. They miss the ease of proximity they had before, the ability to just show up at someone's door or meet up on short notice. In Canada, everything requires more planning, more effort, more intention. And that constant effort can feel exhausting when you're already trying to adjust to everything else. In the end, the real challenge isn't the cold, the cost, the calm pace, or the social rules. It's the identity shift. Canada forces Americans to slow down, to adapt, to rethink comfort, to respect silence, and to live with a kind of gentleness they never had to before. Some adjust and fall in love with it. Others feel overwhelmed by how different life becomes. Canada isn't hard because it's worse than the US. It's hard because it's different in ways most Americans never expect. And that difference requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to change. And not everyone is ready for that. Moving to Canada means confronting parts of yourself you might have been avoiding: your need for constant noise, your reliance on speed, your discomfort with stillness. It means learning to find peace in quiet instead of chaos. It means rebuilding your sense of normal from the ground up. And for some Americans, that process feels like losing themselves rather than finding themselves. The country doesn't reject them. It just asks them to become someone different. And that's a bigger ask than most people realize until they're already living it. The Americans who thrive in Canada are the ones who embrace that transformation. The ones who struggle are the ones who keep waiting for Canada to feel like home without changing what home means to them. So in the end, it's not that Americans physically can't handle Canada. It's that the country forces a different version of them to come out. A quieter one, a slower one, a more patient one. Canada strips away the noise, the rush, the constant stimulation, and leaves people face to face with a lifestyle they were never trained for. Some people adapt and end up loving the peace. Others feel lost in it. And that's okay. Not every country fits every person. But one thing is clear: living in Canada isn't as simple as people imagine. It's a place that tests your comfort zone in ways you don't see until you actually live here. If you learned something new today, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you think you could handle life in Canada? Or would the lifestyle be too different for you? Your answer might surprise you.